Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel.
Hi guys, so happy to have you here with us again today.
Okay, so today's topic is one people ask us about constantly. I only have 30 minutes a day. Is that actually enough to learn English?
And the honest answer is yes, but only if those 30 minutes are structured correctly. Most people waste their 30 minutes on the wrong things.
Which is exactly what we're breaking down today. A real, practical, proven system for using 30 minutes a day. Not some fantasy method, not a course ad, just what actually works based on how language acquisition really functions.
Welcome back everyone, I'm Emma.
And I'm David, and let's get into the actual system.
So first, let's talk about why most people fail with limited time. What's the biggest mistake?
Honestly, the biggest mistake is randomness. People open an app, do a random lesson, scroll through random videos, read a random article with zero consistency in what skill they're actually building that day.
Right, 30 minutes of scattered, random activity is nowhere near as effective as 30 minutes of focused, structured practice, even though it feels like you're doing more when you jump around.
So the first principle of this whole system is structure over randomness. Every single day, you know exactly what you're doing with your 30 minutes before you even sit down.
Let's break down the actual structure then. How do you divide 30 minutes effectively?
We'd recommend splitting it into 3 10-minute blocks, each targeting a different skill, because switching skill types actually helps retention more than doing one long single-focus session.
So block 1, 10 minutes is input, listening or reading something slightly above your current level. Remember that comprehensible input idea from our Teacher Hacks video?
Right, the 80 to 90% understanding zone, a short podcast segment, a graded reader chapter, a couple of minutes of a slowed-down native video, anything where you're absorbing real language, not just studying isolated grammar rules.
Block 2, the next 10 minutes, is active vocabulary work, but done the smart way, not just passively rereading a word list.
This is where spaced repetition comes in, but specifically tied to words or phrases you actually encountered in Block 1. You're not learning random wordless vocabulary, you're reinforcing what you just heard or read.
Which connects the input and the vocabulary work together instead of treating them as two completely separate, disconnected activities.
Exactly, and that connection matters a lot for actual retention because the vocabulary now has real context attached to it, not just an isolated definition.
And block 3, the final 10 minutes, is output, speaking or writing something, even just a few sentences, using what you just reinforced.
This could be talking to yourself out loud, recording a voice memo describing your day, writing 2 or 3 sentences in a journal, or if you have a language partner, a quick voice message exchange.
The key here is that you're not waiting until you feel ready to produce language. Remember, output before you're ready from our Teacher Secrets video. Even shaky, imperfect output every single day compounds dramatically over weeks and months.
So to summarize the daily structure, 10 minutes input, 10 minutes active vocabulary reinforcement tied to that input, 10 minutes output using what you just reinforced. That's the full 30-minute loop.
Let's talk about why this specific structure works so well from a learning science perspective, because I think that context really helps people trust the system.
Sure. So the input phase exposes you to natural language patterns, rhythm, and new vocabulary in context, which builds intuition, not just conscious knowledge.
The vocabulary phase, tied directly to that input, uses what's called contextual reinforcement, meaning you're strengthening memory of a word using the exact context you just experienced it in, which research consistently shows works better than isolated memorization.
And the output phase forces what's called active retrieval, pulling information out of memory rather than just recognizing it passively, which is one of the strongest predictors of long-term retention in learning research generally, not just for language.
So you're essentially covering 3 different cognitive processes in one 30-minute session, instead of repeating the same passive process over and over.
Which is honestly why so many people plateau using apps that only focus on one type of activity, usually just recognition-based vocabulary drills, without ever training output or contextual understanding.
Let's talk consistency now, because I think this matters just as much as the structure itself.
Massively. 30 minutes every single day beats 2 hours once a week by a significant margin, according to pretty much every study on spaced learning and memory consolidation.
Your brain needs repeated spaced exposure over time to actually move information into long-term memory. Cramming creates an illusion of learning that fades incredibly fast.
Which is such an important mindset shift. If you only have 30 minutes today, that's genuinely fine, and arguably better long-term than a rare 3-hour marathon session.
Consistency beats intensity every single time, for a language specifically.
Let's talk practically now. What should someone actually use for each block? Because listen to something is a little vague.
Fair. For the input block, we'd recommend graded podcasts made specifically for learners, slowed down native content with transcripts, or short graded reader chapters, depending on your current level.
The key selection criteria is always that comprehension zone, mostly understandable with just enough new material to stretch you slightly.
For the vocabulary block, any spaced repetition app works, but the crucial part is that you're adding cards manually from what you just encountered, rather than using a massive pre-made deck of random, disconnected words.
It takes a little more effort up front, but the personal connection to each word dramatically improves how well it sticks.
And for the output block, honestly, the simplest tools work best. Your phone's voice recorder, a notes app for quick journaling, or a language exchange app if you want real interaction with another person.
The tool matters far less than actually doing it consistently. Don't get stuck hunting for the perfect app instead of just starting with whatever's already on your phone.
Great point. Let's talk about what to do on days when you genuinely don't have the full 30 minutes, because realistically, that's going to happen sometimes.
Right, life happens. On those days, prioritize the output block above everything else, even if it's just 2 minutes.
Interesting. Why output specifically over input?
Because output is the block most people skip entirely when they're busy, and it's also the block with the strongest link to actual real-world fluency and confidence. Even 2 rushed minutes of speaking practice keeps that skill from going stale.
Whereas input, passive listening, is a bit more forgiving if you miss a day here and there, since it doesn't require the same active effort or confidence building.
So the priority order on a short day is output first, vocabulary second, input third if you're genuinely squeezed for time.
That's such a useful, practical detail. Let's talk about tracking progress too, because 30 minutes a day can feel invisible in the moment, even though it compounds significantly over time.
We'd recommend a simple weekly check-in, not a daily one, because day-to-day progress in language learning is basically impossible to notice, and that invisibility is exactly what causes people to quit early.
Once a week, revisit something from 7 days ago, an old recording of yourself, an article you struggled with, and compare it honestly to how you handle similar material now.
That weekly comparison is where the actual motivation comes from, because 30 minutes a day feels like nothing in the moment, but 3.5 hours a week, compounding over months, adds up to something genuinely significant.
Let's do the math on that, actually, because I think it's motivating to hear the real numbers.
30 minutes a day is about 3.5 hours a week, which comes out to roughly 180 hours over a year, assuming you're reasonably consistent.
180 hours is genuinely substantial. That's comparable to a solid chunk of a full university-level language course, just spread out in small, sustainable daily pieces instead of one intense semester.
Which really reframes the whole "I only have 30 minutes" mindset. It's not a small amount. It's actually a serious amount of practice, as long as it's consistent and structured.
Let's wrap up with a quick troubleshooting section, because we know some of you are going to try this and hit friction pretty quickly.
Good idea. First common issue, I don't know what to say during the output block. I just freeze up.
Totally normal, especially early on. Our advice, start with description, not conversation. Describe your room, describe your day, describe what you just listened to in block 1. Removing the pressure of conversation makes output feel much less intimidating at first.
Second common issue, I don't have anyone to practice speaking with.
Speaking to yourself out loud is genuinely, legitimately effective, especially early on. It feels strange at first, but it still activates the same active retrieval process as speaking to another person.
Third issue, I keep skipping days and losing momentum.
Our honest advice here, lower the bar on hard days instead of skipping entirely. A rushed 5-minute version of this system beats a skipped day every single time, because skipped days tend to snowball into skipped weeks.
Protecting the streak, even in a tiny reduced form, matters more than doing a perfect full session only when conditions are ideal.
Let's talk about one more thing before the recap, because people ask us this constantly. Does the order of the blocks actually matter? Could you do output first, then input, then vocabulary?
Honestly, some flexibility is fine, but we do recommend input specifically because it primes your brain with fresh language before you try to actively use anything. Doing output cold with no warm-up tends to feel harder and more frustrating.
It's a bit like stretching before exercise. Input warms up the relevant mental muscles, vocabulary reinforcement builds strength, and output is the actual workout that builds real capability.
Good analogy. Though if your schedule genuinely only allows for a different order on a specific day, doing something is always better than doing nothing because the order wasn't perfect.
Let's also address a question we get a lot. Should these 30 minutes be the same time every day, or can it vary?
Same time is ideal purely because habits stick better when they're anchored to a consistent trigger, like right after breakfast or right before bed, but it's genuinely not mandatory.
What matters far more than the specific time is that it happens daily, in some form, even a shortened one. The consistency is doing the heavy lifting here, not the exact clock time.
Right, and for people with unpredictable schedules, shift workers, parents with young kids, anchoring to an activity instead of a clock time can actually work better. For example, always right after your morning coffee, regardless of what time that happens to be.
That's a great adjustment for people whose day doesn't follow a fixed routine.
Let's talk about one more practical detail. How do you know when to move up a level, when the input block starts feeling too easy?
Good question. If you're understanding close to 100% of your input material with zero effort, that's actually a sign to increase the difficulty slightly because you've moved out of that ideal stretch zone we talked about earlier.
On the flip side, if you're understanding less than about 70%, genuinely struggling to follow along at all, that's a sign to step back down to easier material, at least temporarily.
It's a constant, gentle recalibration, not a one-time decision. Your level today isn't your level in 3 months, so the material should keep shifting gradually alongside your progress.
Which is honestly one of the biggest differences between people who plateau and people who keep improving steadily. The ones who keep improving are constantly, quietly adjusting their input difficulty upward as they grow.
All right, let's recap the whole system before we wrap up. 30 minutes split into 3 10-minute blocks. Input, active vocabulary tied to that input, and output using what you just reinforced.
Prioritize consistency over intensity, prioritize output first on short days, track progress weekly instead of daily, and lower the bar rather than skipping entirely when life gets busy.
That's the real system. No gimmicks, no miracle app, just structured, consistent, science-backed daily practice.
Let us know in the comments if you're going to try this system, and check back in with us in a month to tell us how it went.
We genuinely want to hear real results, good or bad, so we can keep refining advice like this based on what actually works for real people.
If this helped you, hit subscribe because we've got a follow-up video planned specifically for people with even less time, like 15 minutes a day, coming soon.
That one's going to require some real creative compression.
Can't wait. Thanks for watching, everyone.
See you in the next one.